Chapter Guild, Stories for Your Mind.
The Dim Between. Chapter 1. The Fading Light. The light window opened at 11:14, 3 minutes later than yesterday. Rowan marked it in the leather notebook he kept by the door, the same way he had marked it every day for the past 6 years. 3 minutes was nothing. But it was the difference between the solar collector reaching full charge and the battery needle stopping just short, hovering below the line he had scratched into the gauge with his thumbnail. He closed the notebook and stepped outside. The farm spread before him in the gray-white wash of filtered sun, and the smell of damp stone and lamp oil followed him out the door. 2 terraced rows of potatoes ran east along the slope. He crossed past the raised bed of root vegetables, the low stone wall his father had built catching morning damp on its face. Beyond, the solar collector stood on its metal legs like a skeletal bird, panels tilted to catch whatever light the clouds would spare. Rowan had cleaned those panels at first dark, wiping the condensation with a rag, checking the mount bolts by the thin whine of his wind-up flashlight. The collector's joints needed oiling again, and they always needed oiling. He crossed to the potato rows first, where the soil was dark and damp, as it always was, for moisture was the one thing the dim provided in abundance. He knelt and worked his fingers into the earth near the base of a plant, feeling for the tubers, gauging their size by touch. Not ready, he thought. Another week, maybe 2. He wiped his hands on his trousers and moved down the row, repeating the check every few feet, his fingers reading the underground garden the way his eyes read the sky. The sky itself was the usual, a low, gray ceiling that shifted from slate to pearl depending on the density of the clouds above. He read the difference between 12 layers of cloud and 14 the way most people read, the difference between a sunny day and an overcast one. Or so he assumed, though he had never met most people. From inside the house came the sound of coughing. He straightened and listened. The cough had a rhythm he knew too well by now. 3 sharp barks, a pause. Then the deeper sound, the one that came from low in the chest and did not stop when it should. He counted the seconds until it subsided, 14, whereas last week the fits had lasted 8 or 9. Rowan pulled 2 small weeds from the potato row, set them aside for composting, and moved to the root vegetable bed to begin loosening the soil around the turnips with a hand fork. The coughing started again. He did not go inside. His mother had made her position on hovering clear, and Mira Voss was not a woman who required clarification. He continued working, his hands steady, his ears tracking the sounds from the house with the same attention he gave to shifts in the wind or the slow creep of mold across the storage shed wall. The light window had a particular quality today, brighter than average. The clouds must have thinned at the upper layer, letting an extra fraction of a percent through. Rowan turned his face upward, the warmth touching the back of his neck, less heat than absence of cold. His mother did this sometimes when she thought he was not watching. She called it remembering. He called it standing still with your eyes closed, but he did it anyway. The coughing had stopped, and he went back to the turnips. By the time Mira appeared in the doorway, Rowan had finished the root bed, tightened 2 loose bolts on the collector mount, and started on the rain catch filter. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching him work. 61 years old, thin in a way that had less to do with the limited diet than it should have. Her hair, steel gray and cut short for practicality, stuck up on one side from the pillow. The collector is pulling 3% above yesterday, Rowan said without looking up. I can see that. Mira stepped out onto the flat stone that served as their front step. She wore her heavy wool coat despite the relative warmth of the light window. That was new. She had not worn the coat during light windows before this month. The east panel has a hairline crack in the sealant, Rowan said. I can patch it, but I will need to take it down during the next after window. Her voice was quiet, and he looked up, Her face was composed, the expression she wore when she had decided something and was waiting for the right moment to say it. He knew that expression from 34 years of living with it. "Your turnips are fine," she said. "Come eat." They ate inside at the small table his father had built from reclaimed planks. Boiled potatoes, dried mushroom broth, a handful of the preserved greens Mira grew in the window box during the light windows. The house smelled of the broth, and beneath it, the sour undertone of yarrow tea steeping on the counter. They ate without talking, which was normal. Conversation during meals was something Mira considered wasteful, a before habit she had discarded along with most others. Rowan had once asked what other before habits she had discarded. She had listed them with the same flat precision she applied to everything: small talk, breakfast cereals, and recreational shopping. He had not known what most of those things were, and she had not explained. The books sat on the shelf above the table, where the lamp cast its warmest light. 4 of them, spines cracked, pages soft from the damp despite the wax cloth Rowan wrapped them in each after window. A medical encyclopedia, thick as his forearm, with a blue cover faded to gray. A plant identification guide. Largely useless at this altitude, but Mira kept it because knowledge did not expire just because your circumstances changed. A physics textbook, college level, that Rowan had read cover to cover 3 times without understanding more than half of it. The half he did understand, he found beautiful in the way the potato rows were beautiful, ordered, logical, describing a world that behaved according to rules even when those rules were strange. And the Far Side collection, missing its back cover, the cartoons yellow and fragile, the cow standing at the blackboard, the amoeba splitting at the dinner table. Mira finished her broth and set the bowl aside. She studied him, some thought working behind her expression. Then she said, 72 years. Rowan looked at her. Since a person could walk outside at any hour and see the ground clearly, 72 years since you could go out at midnight and read a book by something called a streetlight. She said it the way she always said before things. Matter of fact, no longing in it, as if she were reading from one of the textbooks. Data, not memory. Your father remembered it better than I do. He was older when it happened. She coughed, one bark, then another, then the deep one. She turned her head and pressed her sleeve against her mouth. When she pulled it away, the fabric was dark. The stain could have been broth. It could have been shadows in the dim interior of the house. But Rowan had spent his life reading faint differences in gray light, and the stain on her sleeve was not broth and was not shadow. He set his spoon down, and the sound it made against the table was small and precise, and after it the room was quiet, except for the rain catch dripping outside. "How long?" he said. Mira looked at the sleeve. She touched the edge of the stain with one finger, her expression unchanged. Then she looked at him, and she did not pretend. That was not something she did. And he had never been grateful for that quality more than right now, and never less. A few weeks, maybe longer. She folded her arms so the stain was hidden, the gesture precise, a closing of the subject's visible evidence. The yarrow tea is not working anymore. The thyme poultice helps with the congestion but not the underlying infection. If it is what I think it is, and it is, then I need something I do not have. What do you need? Rowan said. Antibiotics, amoxicillin or azithromycin, ideally, but I would take anything in the penicillin family. She said the words carefully, with the precision of someone who had memorized them from a textbook decades ago and practiced their pronunciation alone, knowing she might need them someday. They existed in enormous quantities, before. Every pharmacy had them, and every hospital stored them by the crate. People took them for things that did not even require them, such as ear infections or sinus trouble. She shook her head. An abundance so large it bred carelessness. And now? Rowan asked. Some settlements may still have stockpiles. Sealed packaging keeps the compounds viable for decades if stored properly. Cool, dry, dark. She looked at him with the steady gaze that meant she was about to say something practical that would cost him. The valley settlements traded in medicines 10 years ago when your father went down for the sealant supplies. He said Meridian had a clinic, a real one with a real doctor. Rowan knew the name, and his father had mentioned it, a walled settlement 3 days downhill. Built around one of the larger light wells. His father had gone there once 22 years ago. He had come back with sealant compound, 3 packets of vegetable seeds, and a story about walls so tall they blocked the sky. Rowan had been 12, and he had thought his father was exaggerating. Rowan said he had never been past the lower ridge, and Mira said she knew. They sat with that. The light window cast its gray-white glow through the single window, illuminating the dust motes that drifted between them. Somewhere outside, the rain catch dripped its steady rhythm into the storage tank. Your herbal treatments, Rowan said, are managing symptoms, not the infection. Mira picked up her bowl and carried it to the wash basin. Her back was straight, her movements deliberate, but Rowan could see the effort in them, the careful placement of each step, the slight pause when she bent to set the bowl down. She was conserving energy, and she had been conserving energy for weeks, but he had not seen it because he had not wanted to. I will go tomorrow, he said. You will go when the light window opens and not a minute before, and you will eat a proper meal first, she said as she ran water over the bowl. I did not raise you to make dramatic decisions on an empty stomach. The light window closed at 3:51. 4 hours and 37 minutes. And Rowan wrote it in his notebook. The after window settled over the mountain, the already dim light fading to the deep gray twilight that would last until tomorrow's window. He lit the oil lamp and checked the storage shed for mold. The dark patches along the back wall had spread another 2 centimeters since last week. He scraped what he could with the edge of a faded plastic card. Something from before with a bank's name raised in letters across its face. It made a decent scraping tool, which was enough purpose for anything these days. Mira read by the lamp for an hour, then went to bed. She did not mention the journey again, and she did not need to. Rowan waited until her breathing steadied into sleep. Then he pulled the medical encyclopedia from the shelf and carried it to the table. The wind-up flashlight whined as he cranked it, the mechanism's thin protest loud in the quiet house. The small LED cast its narrow cone of bluish light onto the page. He found the entry on bacterial pneumonia under the respiratory section. And the symptoms matched: productive cough, blood in sputum, chest pain, fatigue, fever. He had not noticed a fever, but Mira was the kind of person who would simply choose not to mention one. The treatment section was half a page long, listing first-line antibiotics, dosage schedules, and duration of treatment. Someone had underlined a single word in pencil, the line faint but deliberate, the handwriting not his mother's. Antibiotics. His father's hand, maybe, or his father's father's. Someone in this house years ago had read this page and thought the word important enough to mark. He closed the encyclopedia and set his hand on its cover. Feeling the grain of the cloth binding, the slight ridge where the spine had cracked and been repaired with glue his father had made from rendered rabbit hide. This book had outlived the civilization that printed it. It sat on a shelf in a stone house on a mountain in the permanent gray, and it still knew how to save his mother's life. The knowledge was all there, clear and precise, only the medicine was missing. Rowan crossed to the far wall, where a hand-drawn map hung from a nail. His father had made it, copying from an older map that had long since disintegrated. The mountain was at the top, their farm marked with a small X. Below, the terrain descended through contour lines that grew closer together at the ridges, then spread apart in the valleys. Settlements were marked with circles, and most had question marks beside them. One, the largest, was labeled in his father's careful printing: Meridian. Below the name was a number, 3 days. He touched the map. The paper was soft under his fingers, the ink fading at the edges. 3 days downhill to a place he had never been, through terrain he had never walked. To ask strangers for medicine he could not pay for. 3 days back, or a week if he moved well. The bedroom door, the map, and the hairline crack in the east panel's sealant. A week of mountain moisture working into it without him here to patch it. The mold gaining its 2 centimeters, then 2 more, and the rain catch filter he had not finished cleaning. Everything on this mountain ran on attention and maintenance, and for the first time in 22 years, there would be no one here to provide either. The flashlight dimmed. He wound it again, the whine cutting through the silence, and let it fade. Outside, the mountain was quiet in the deep dim, with no wind tonight. No sound from below. From the valleys and lowlands he had never seen except as contour lines on aging paper. 3 days downhill through terrain no one in this house had walked in 22 years. To a place that might have changed beyond recognition or might not exist at all. Rowan pulled down his father's canvas pack from the hook beside the door and set it on the table. Good canvas, thick and tightly woven, the kind they did not make anymore because nobody made anything anymore. They maintained and repaired and made do. He opened the drawstrings and began to pack,